Twitter is one of the top 3 social networking sites on the internet today. Obviously, Facebook's the big boy, and depending on how you measure, LinkedIn and YouTube and Google Plus will kind of come into that mix as well, and LinkedIn for business, of course. But one way or another, Twitter always kind of ends up in the top 3 no matter what measurement you see. It is one of the top 10 most visited sites on the internet, but it is also a microblogging service. So that's how we kind of get it's born out of SMS. Everybody's familiar with text messages and that sort of thing. So that's how we get the 140 character format that everybody's familiar with. Some Twitter facts and figures, again, recruiting you to the pitch. You can be one of 554 million registered users if you have not already signed up for Twitter. That's a pretty good number if you consider that Facebook just hit 1 billion, so Twitter's about halfway there. 58 million tweets a day, but to me the number that really jumps off on this screen is that there are 2.1 billion searches daily on Twitter. So just kind of that, to me, that just speaks to how much traffic and how much content is there, that people go there knowing that they might be able to find the things that they're looking for. And later on we'll show you what you might find there as well. So we're still looking to answer the question, why should I tweet? Why should you tweet for your business? Well, other businesses are doing it. This is a study from the University of Massachusetts that indicated that among the Fortune 500, a group that maybe some of you would like to be a member of at some point, they love Twitter. They continue to use Twitter even more than Facebook, which, as we mentioned before, has like 1 billion users. So if these guys value it, maybe there's something to this whole Twitter thing. This is a really fun slide. I'll give you guys a minute to kind of take this all in. Social Annex is where we get this site from. Social Annex is a socially focused e-commerce platform. And what they did is they surveyed chief marketing officers to get their opinions on social in general. But we can kind of extrapolate, Twitter, given the size of it, out to the way that social networking sites affect a company's ability to generate sales, brand loyalty, and brand awareness, which I'm sure is things that you are all interested in at some point. And other things, the stuff at the bottom is really interesting, especially for marketers, is that through these other things we've been able to generate or been able to discern that social marketing allows us to measure the sentiment towards products, our demographics, and the influence that our users have on other users, which is really kind of the crux of this whole social networking thing in terms of marketing. If you are sports fans, you'll note the kind of little joke in there. So why should you why should we tweet? I've looked at this slide 15 million times, and this is the first time I've noticed that typo. So as the Fortune 500, why should we tweet? It's like, because the big boys are doing it, and we want to be the big boys one day too. So we can follow their lead. We can see the best practices that they have set before us, and we can do what they do when they do it well, and one day become leaders ourselves. The other reason that we want to tweet, there's a competitive advantage to be had there. If your competitors don't tweet, then there's that opportunity for you to jump in there and take that space. Now, if your competitors tweet and you don't, well, then the opposite is true. They can take advantage and maybe get ahead of you from that perspective. And then, as we demonstrated, 550 million folks on Twitter, there's a good chance that among them are some of your customers, and if not potential customers. And what we know about social networking is that, especially on a personal level, in terms of like all those shares, all those tweets, and then even the stuff that Seth was talking about on Facebook, people want to connect with brands that they love, and what they love they will buy, and then what they buy they will share. And that's kind of how the whole circle kind of works with social marketing. Get my boom here. All right, so got a fresh batch of recruits. We need you all to sign on the dotted line. We're all going to get in here, right? All right, I'll take your word for it. So we're going to just kind of run through this really quick, just in case we did have some people that have never even looked at Twitter. This is basically what you'll find at twitter.com. Pretty simple to sign up. Just need your name and email address and a password. This is the screen after that. They want you to come up with a username. Some of you might have seen, I did a little, for the purposes of this demonstration, put together our DMF Tweet Camp account. That's what we ended up with as a URL. Twitter Training Camp was not available. It's also a little long. You do have only 15 characters for your Twitter username. which can get a little sticky if you have a long business name. I've seen the list of some of the folks that are here today, and their business names are much longer than 15 characters, but that's okay. You can find some sort of abbreviation like this. You know, Digital Marketing Forum Twitter Training Camp obviously wasn't going to fit, so we shortened it down to DMF Tweet Camp. One of the other things I want to mention is that if you have a very common name as opposed to like a really long individual name, if you were Al's Plumbing, Al's Plumbing's probably taken. But if you wanted to be maybe Al's Plumbing RVA, that tends to be the sort of thing that you see with this. Only other thing to point out here is that you can only have one Twitter username per email address. So if you're the kind of person like me who wants to have a lot of Twitter accounts, or if you're just somebody that wants to separate your personal from your business, you might want to make sure that you have separate email addresses set aside for that. So the first screen you see after that, Twitter gives you a very basic tutorial. They want to tell you who to follow. I'm sure everybody wants to follow Shaquille O'Neal and Taylor Swift and Pixar and Dr. Dre. I don't know what it was about our email address that made them think that these would be our first followers. I like these folks instead. Give a shout out to my buddy Nat there, obviously Retail Merchants and Richmond.com. The Times Dispatch was on there too, but their most recent tweet was a little interesting on Sunday afternoon when I was making the slide. But who should you follow? Follow strategy is a really big thing when you're getting started with it. Who should I follow? People tend to go one way or another. They don't know who to follow, so they don't really follow anybody. Or they want to follow everybody, and they're just like every company that they've ever heard of, anybody, you know, they just go through and follow everyone and just kind of look like crazy. And in fact, what you look like is spammers, but we'll get that in a minute. So who should you follow? First and foremost, follow your friends. If I was to come to you and you said, hey, I just joined Twitter, I'd like, wait, you don't follow me yet? So you don't want to have to answer that question. So go ahead and follow your friends when you get started. One of the reasons we're here is to connect with our customers, so you want to go ahead and follow them if you know who they are. Maybe one of your customers told you, hey, you got to get on this Twitter thing. And then if you have business partners, if you have relationships with folks like the Retail Merchants Association and you want to keep up with them and that sort of thing, that's a good person to follow as well. Other people like to follow experts and leaders. I personally, as a social marketer, there are dozens of people, if not hundreds out there on Twitter that I like to keep up with and follow and learn from and share what they post. Potential customers. We'll talk about other ways that you can find these potential customers, but the opportunity to kind of make the first step in that relationship in a very kind of passive way. If you can see somebody that seems to be interested in the things that your business is into, that's a good way to make that initial connection and make them aware of your product. And then it seems to go without saying to me, but a lot of people don't follow their own followers. You want to do that. They've made the effort to make some sort of connection with you. They've shown that interest. Reciprocate. Show it back to you. Reciprocate is going to come up again. I think of it as I say that. But do me a favor and follow your followers. It's not that hard, and it's just nice to do. The asterisk, like I said, please follow responsibly. Pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I don't tend to get too bent out of shape about a follow ratio. You'll see, especially a few years ago, it used to be a huge thing. Like, well, how many people should I follow versus how many followers I have? Don't get bent out of shape about that. But you do want to not go out on your first day and follow 1,000 people when nobody's even bothered to follow you yet. Give yourself some time, follow the people that are most important to you, and then just demonstrate the reason that you're on Twitter. Demonstrate yourself as an expert or a leader in your field. And then add those folks. Find out who wants to follow you, find out who's enjoying your message, but you don't have to go and run out and follow everyone on Twitter right off the bat, because that's a lot of clicks for 550 million people. All right. So moving on, this basically completes our original setup. If you don't do your graphic design yourself, you're going to want to get a square version of your logo so everybody knows it's you. This is our little DMF Tweet Camp profile. You get a chance to give a few words about yourself. So when people come to your page, they'll know what they're following or what they're getting into. It's about the size of a tweet. Go figure. You can also identify with your region, and which will be important later. And it gives you a chance to put your website address. I did not make a whole website for this presentation, but maybe I will. And if you did, you would see that there as well. All right. So we're all set up now. And this is what our home page looks like. You can see we got a mini profile there in the top left corner. Shows you how many followers you have, how many people you are following, and also how many times you have tweeted. Gives you an opportunity to bump that tweet count up right there by submitting a new tweet. We'll jump over to the other side. Since we are still a new account, Twitter wants us to find more friends via email. So that's a good resource if you have, had an Outlook account or whatever for 1 million years and have all your contacts stored in there. You can find all of those folks on Twitter using that. If you've already done that or you don't care to do that, the box goes away very easily. Next thing we see is our timeline. Those 5 accounts that we followed originally, you can see what they have tweeted most recently, and you can also see who they have retweeted. We'll talk about retweets a little bit more in a minute, but we see that we didn't follow the Richmond Kickers or Vic Dorr, but since the Times-Dispatch retweeted their posts on Sunday, those show up in our timeline as well. Just a quick word about trending topics. That's a big deal on Twitter. These are based on all of those tweets that are coming out, by the minute, by the second. These are the most popular things. We have I don't know how easy it is to read on here, but when you get your own copy of this and see, this is a global view. This is what's trending all over the world on Twitter. If you hit the change button, you do have the opportunity to have just a local search in terms of what's trending locally, which might be a little more interesting to us. And so if you identified yourself on the previous screen as from Richmond, Virginia, then that'll show you what's trending in Richmond or wherever you decided to identify yourself as. So that's why that one's important. All right, so sign up on the team, got you a little bit oriented. Small businesses and football teams, they all have their own terminology, their own, the jargon that vets use to confuse rookies. So we don't want that to happen to you guys, so we're going to get to know our playbook a little bit better. Here is the anatomy of a tweet. This is from my personal account, but I wanted to do that as kind of a demonstration of what shows up in a tweet. You can see there are 2 different places that a username can show up. You can see my username there at the top. Please follow me at Thomas McDonald. And then you can see in the blue text our DMF Tweet Camp account. Since I gave a shout out to that, that's considered a mention. But it's also a hyperlink. If you clicked on that, it would go straight to the profile page that we just saw. You can see our hashtag RVA. We'll talk a little bit more about hashtags in a minute. The retweet is a very common thing. Everybody should have heard it. If you heard of tweeting, you should have heard retweeting. It's one of the most common activities, and it's just kind of your way of sharing with your audience something that you've seen from somebody else's Twitter feed. So from the DMF Tweet Camp account, I did retweet this. You can see that it says retweeted there. And then I also favorited it. Favoriting is a fairly new thing on Twitter, but it is their answer to the like button on Facebook. It's become a lot more popular, but it's not quite as open. On your Facebook page, you can see if you have it open wide enough to see the always kind of going newsfeed there on the side. You can see every time somebody likes a photo or likes a page. Not the same way with favorites. It is public, but it's not going to spam your feed. It's not going to spam your Twitter feed with that information. This tweet was very popular right off the bat. You can see the British flag indicates our buddy Rob there in the back, Rob Clark. Saw this tweet and went ahead and favorited it right away. As we tweeted and favorited it from our account. What's great about this little box in the middle is that it gives you an idea of who is favoriting and retweeting your stuff. So since anybody can pretty much see these things, I wasn't following Rob from this account, but he saw it through my stream and went ahead and favorited it. So if I was the DMF Tweet Camp account, I could click on that and say, oh, Rob is from the RTD. I can go ahead and follow him too. So it's a good way to find out who's looking at you, even if maybe you're not necessarily looking at them. Direct messaging, another basic function of Twitter. I wanted to go through this a little bit quicker, sorry about that. Direct messaging is kind of it's a neat function. It's kind of the email, the short email within Twitter. You have kind of your Twitter inbox here. You can find that from your settings. There's a lot of great opportunities for you to connect with people that start following you. You do have to be following back and forth. So if I want to send a direct message to you, you have to be following me first. So that kind of protects you from just everybody on Twitter just spamming you all the time. But if you follow folks and you're not sure that they're not spammers, there is opportunity for abuse there. So you want to keep an eye on that. But this is kind of a powerful tool when used correctly. I talked about hashtags before. Hashtag RVA, very popular hashtag. What is a hashtag? And we used to call this the pound sign. I think Twitter's effectively stolen that in the cultural lexicon. So anytime that you put the hash symbol in front of a word, it makes it on Twitter, it makes it a hypertext link, makes it searchable. And it's kind of Twitter's way of organizing things into topics. So originally, hashtag RVA was a very good way to keep up with what's going on in town. Since anybody can use it, it's now fairly rife with spam, but there are still some things there. But you can even break it down further. One of my favorite hashtags right now is hashtag RVA Dine, which kind of keeps up with news about the local restaurant scene. Who's opening, who's closing, what some of the specials are at some of the finer restaurants. and just kind of keeping you up to date with that sort of thing. But we could have had a hashtag for this event. I got here a little late, so I didn't hear if maybe we did. We could have been hashtags can get ridiculous, I'll admit that, but we could have been hashtag digital marketing forum, hashtag DMF, RVA, something like that. But you'll see that a lot. And the purpose of that, I'll use the TV analogy. It allows you to take all of those all those 550 million people, and segment them in kind of your own way. Basically, the TV analogy being that you can create channels using hashtags. And the great thing about hashtags as channels versus TV channels is that you only have to have the ones that you want. All right. So, still rookies, some of us, but we're going to give you some of the tricks and tools now. This is what gets you up to intermediate level as quickly as we can. Using what the pros use. Talked a little bit about search before. Obviously, that's a lot of searches, 2.1 billion searches a day. This is the interface that most of them are using. It is a real-time search. And so at any given moment, if you want to pop in a search here for, say you are Al's Plumbing, and you want to see the people that are having some sort of issue, or there's probably a better idea than that. I got one. We're going to talk about sporting goods here in a minute. But say you are looking for people that are getting ready for a fall softball league, or that sort of thing. You can search fall softball, and you will find anybody that's talking about that. This is one of the ways that people find news on celebrities. It's a very popular thing to do on Twitter, or just news in general. As we know, anybody that's following the kind of explosion of Twitter in the past few years has been very good for breaking news, particularly in the Middle East. I had some good slides about the royal baby, but I left those out. Maybe I'll throw them back in for the internet version. So just some different things that you might look for. People who are looking for a service you provide, like we mentioned. Competitors, you can follow your competitors in this way, even if you don't know them by name. If you know what your keywords are, a lot of times your competitors will come up in that search as well. You can search for local things. There's the advanced search options will let you localize. So if you're looking for somebody to partner with, maybe you're a web designer and you need somebody to help you with graphics or so on and so forth, that could help you out. And ultimately, you can find more people to follow in this way. List building. List building to me is still one of the most underrated things that you can do on Twitter. We talk about just like the sheer volume of tweets that are out there. This gives you, to me, one of the best ways to segment those things to make it much easier to manage. So a few great things about the Twitter list. You can organize your interests. I think we're gonna see on one of the slides here in a minute. I am, as you might have guessed, a huge sports fan. So I like to know what sports writers are notorious tweeters and broadcasters and that sort of thing. But when we talk about follow ratio, Scott Van Pelt from ESPN is never going to follow me back. It'd be cool if he did, but he's probably not going to. So instead of messing up my ratio with that, I can make a list of sports writers, and then I don't only see it. And the great thing about lists as well is that you don't actually have to follow them to put them on a list. So just kind of to use the image here as a reference, I think this is a list of people who have Social Media Club of Richmond on one of their lists. So you can see just like the different ways that people categorize it. And this is a good way if you wanted to find new followers. There's a Richmond-only list. So if you wanted to follow a local group, you could go to that list. You could either just follow that list, or you could follow the people who are on that list. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the strength of lists as we go forward. I apologize, this is a recycled slide, but it's still fit from last year's presentation, so if you were here last year, I apologize for the rerun. This is an image of TweetDeck, or this is an image of Hootsuite, but TweetDeck is very similar in the way that it lets you organize. So remember on our homepage, we just saw the timeline. We just saw the timeline of what the people that we were following, what they were tweeting. That's what's all the way on the left column here. But as we go over to these next columns, what you'll find is all the people that have mentioned, this is from my personal Hootsuite, so you'll see people that have mentioned me on the second row, people that have sent me direct messages in the third row, and then on the fourth row there is that sports writer list that I was talking about. So it kind of gives you a more powerful way to separate all of the things that you want to see on Twitter without just having the one list and trying to, the one timeline stream and trying to make the best of that. Twitter is huge on mobile. I think most people probably do tweet from their phones at this point. These are some of the apps. This is from the Android or from the Google Play Store. It's pretty much the same characters if you're an iOS user. I have loved and fallen out of love with at least 5 of these over the years with different updates and changes to both Twitter and the apps themselves. So my advice on that is just try a few and see which one works best for how you use Twitter. Twitter themselves, their official app, they've basically been, since they started making money, been going through and buying anybody that was kind of good. They bought TweetDeck, they bought what used to be called Tweety, and so there's actually a lot more value in the original Twitter apps than there used to be. All right, there's an inside football term for you. So installing our game plan. All right, we're going to look at Twitter as as an offensive tool. And so we got to know what we're going to tweet. What will I tweet is probably the next big question after what is Twitter. And at a certain point, I think it's kind of the wrong question, because the way I want to go about it is if you had a personal account, what you really want to put out there is like what you're passionate about, and so that people would have some idea of why they want to follow you because you're already talking about it. So if it was, for me, I talk a lot about social marketing and what really excites me in that arena and how I think it can help small businesses. So if you want to know about that, I'm a good person to follow. If you want to know about celebrities, I don't follow any Kardashians. I don't retweet Kanye or anything like that. I don't follow Taylor Swift. So I'm not going to be the right person to follow that. So extrapolate that to your business account. It's okay to tweet about your business. Nobody wants to be sold to all the time, so keep that in mind. But people know you're a business. They want to follow you for a reason, and they want to see what it is about you that makes you exceptional in your field. So I always say be an expert next is kind of like if you don't want every tweet to be a sales pitch, what do you want to tweet about if you're tweeting about your business? Well, tweet about not how they can get your business, but why they would want your business in the first place. So I say be an expert, but what I really mean is be a resource. And then the next, and so from that point, it's a little bit of a jump to be interesting and relevant. But again, you still have to just think when you're sending out a tweet, would I want to read this tweet if I was on the other end of the computer? Which kind of brings us back to be yourself. Seth mentioned at the end of his presentation, have fun with it. Hopefully you are passionate about what you do and your business and sharing the solutions that you provide, and just do it in your own voice. If you're a little bit sarcastic, like I tend to be, don't be afraid to let that come out. Don't be mean. Don't turn people off. But if you want to tell a joke every now and then, that's fine. If you are a family-oriented business, talk about the great things that you do for family. Talk about your family. That's okay. You want to be yourself. And then the other thing is to reciprocate. We talked about retweets a little bit. You want to not just, I think Seth Godin used to call it interruption marketing. You don't want to just be like the television ad that we all skip on the DVR now. You don't just want to be putting out your content. You want to be sharing other people's content and responding when people ask you questions and want to interact with you. So reciprocation is a big part of social networking in general, but especially one of the finer features of Twitter. So I mentioned that content is our offense in this sports cliche that we're using here. And I deal a lot with content, and so what I like to say about content, it is both the king and the kingdom. It's king because it's paramount. It's what you say, it's how you say it, it's when you say it, it's how people react to what it is that you said. So it's extremely important. You want to focus as much time as you can on that and making the most of the time that you have to spend on Twitter, the resources that you have to put towards it, which makes it which kind of stresses people out to make it seem, to make 140 characters seem that important. It is, but it's not that hard to come by because it's also the kingdom. It's all around us. There is something that you do every day in your business that you could make into a functional tweet, into a tweet that your users will want to see, that makes you all the things that we said before, that shows that you are a resource, that shows that you are interesting, that shows that you are involved in your community and in your business. It's just kind of a mindset that you have to get to. And you get through it through practice. Practice. We're talking about practice. Just let that sink in for a minute. I put on my own personal Facebook page. You gotta love when you can put George Peppard in a professional presentation. So like everything else in your business, your Twitter and your social media in general requires planning. And so you want to set long-term goals, and you want to align them with your business objectives. And what I kind of mean by that is, everybody has a place that they want their business to go, and a lot of the things that you do are pushing yourself to that goal. Your social media presence can be the same, and Twitter in particular. Even if you are not the absolute leader in the plumbing industry in Richmond, but you would like to be, you want your tweets and you want your Facebook presence, everything to reflect that is your goal. But we need to break that down into things that we can do on a regular basis. So what we ultimately are going to do is we're going to create a master calendar, what we call an editorial calendar. And just like aligning your content plan with your business objectives, you want to make sure that all of those things go together. If you've got an event, if you've got big conferences or meetings, work that into it. Take pictures, take videos, that sort of thing, and then have a calendar for when you're going to release those. If you're having, even if you're having like a staff birthday party, people want to know who you are and who your company is. It's worthwhile to have that stuff planned out, and also kind of an indication of like how everything at a certain point can be content. But the biggest thing and the biggest problem that people have is that they don't set aside time to do it regularly. You sit down and you do your first month plan, and then at the end of that month, you haven't set aside any time to see what you're going to do next month. So this is mostly a reiteration slide. This is what we want to be, our plan B. That was a lot more clever when I wrote it down. So we want to stay on message about 80% of the time. I could use that in my own work. Inspirational quotes are great. I love inspirational quotes. Every now and then I'll do it for my personal account because I want to be an inspirational person. But unless you're a life coach or a yoga instructor, some of you might be, try to stick to the topics that make you worth following. We talked about how you can get, it's okay to get off base every now and then in a way that relates to your business, but unless I am following you for inspirational quotes, unless that's your goal, is to inspire me as opposed for me to buy your product or employ your service. Try to be on message as much as we can. Be a person, like I said before, we talked about reciprocation. Be a person, interact, respond to people who respond to you, answer their questions, find posts that interest you and share them and favorite them because you like it when people do it for you. And the other thing is to, as we were alluding to in terms of like the planning, we want to be consistent, we want to be present. We can't be on Twitter all day long. It seems like some of us are, but we have businesses to run, and the Twitter is just rife with people that started out and had great accounts. They had great content to share, and they shared it all the first day. Or they shared it all the first month. They got through that first month of their editorial plan, and they didn't make another plan, and then they just kind of disappeared. We don't want to do that. So we talked about Twitter, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, I just don't have time for this. I'm busy running my business, just like we talked about. So I've got for you maybe the most important slide. Again, everybody's going to get copies of these slides, and then I'll put them out on the internet and everything so you can reference them later if you so desire. This is Twitter maintenance, regular maintenance for the time-crunched entrepreneur. I know that time-crunched entrepreneur is a bit of a redundancy, so bear with me on that. So here's basically 4 things you can do every day that'll keep you present, current, consistent, all those other things we talked about. Log in every day. Check your messages, your mentions, your retweets, and favorites. Every day? Okay. Every other day. Respond when necessary. Follow anyone who merits it. All right? You'll get a lot of spam. Twitter could probably stop it, but they don't want to because it helps their numbers. That's just a side. But you know who the people are. If it's somebody local, if it's somebody that's in your industry, follow them back. It's cool. Check for new followers. Again, see who's following you. If they're not spammers, follow them back. We talked about that before. If it's somebody that you think could be a potential customer or a potential partner, just send them a tweet. Shout out that they recognized you and let them know that you appreciate it. Take a quick read through your timeline, or if you're following a lot of people, hopefully you've set up some lists that are really focused on the people that you want to read their tweets the most. Maybe it's your potential customer list and you're trying to reach out to somebody specific. Maybe it's the experts and you just kind of need a little motivation to get you going in any given day. And what we're looking for is a couple posts to retweet. Because again, we want to be in the stream and we want to be reciprocating. And then post or schedule, we haven't talked about scheduling yet, but we will in a second. post your tweets for the day. And boom, just like that, you've already made your plan, you've already got your calendar, you know what you're talking about today, you know what photo you're posting, you know what video you're linking to, and it's already set out there for you. So then boom, just like that, you've taken care of Twitter for the day at a minimum. If you have some free time later and you want to go back to it, you can repeat these steps if you want. You can pick and choose. Our secret weapon. Our chief weapon is surprise. So I was glad that Seth didn't mention this because I do use this for Facebook as well. But this is a screenshot of a little thing called Buffer App. Buffer App's fairly new in the last year or so. Buffer App has been great for me because I have all of these social media channels that I try to share through, but I don't try to share the same thing on all of them. So what you'll see here, let's see. I guess I'll explain how Buffer works. So say that you I used to use Google Reader to find great blog posts, or every time I get emails from websites that I like, and I go to their page and I was like, I really want to share this. But instead of having to go to Twitter and copy and paste the link and everything else, Buffer App allows me to do that right inside the browser. So this is inside your browser window. You just click the little Buffer App in the corner. It's those little 3-layered squares. And this is what pops up. It pre-populates basically a tweet for you based on the article that you are looking at. You can sign in with whichever accounts that you want. You'll see that this post here, I have used my Twitter account and my LinkedIn account. I have not used my Facebook account. People on Facebook get kind of antsy about hashtags, although maybe not as much as before, since they have them now. You can see here that you can personalize the content. So I didn't just share the post. I also said, this is a great post. I'm going to incorporate some of it into my Twitter training camp speech that I'm going to give on Thursday. And then you can put it in your buffer. The buffer is free, which is one of the best things, and you can put up to 10 such posts at a time. So again, if you have a really busy week and you don't see yourself having time even for 10 minutes a day on Twitter, fill up your buffer, and you can kind of stay out there and sharing things that matter to you and are going to matter to your followers. The other great thing, we talked a little bit about analytics on the other side. I don't really get too much into it more, but Buffer App will show you for everything that you put through the buffer, it'll show you who's clicked on it, who's retweeted it, who's mentioned it, and how many people potentially had a chance to see your tweet, which is pretty valuable. When should you tweet? Talk a little clock management here. This matches my experience in business, is that a lot of people have 1 o'clock meetings, and a lot of them look at their phones during those meetings. So Twitter traffic is pretty steady during business hours, Monday through Thursday, 1 to 3. Kind of your best times to tweet. If you only tweet once a day, you want to get something out around these times. So if you're not using a scheduling app and you want to make sure that you get out your 1 tweet a day, maybe do it at lunch, and so it's out there. After 3 o'clock on Friday, people check out from Twitter. Again, I don't think that's a coincidence. The weekend tweeting numbers are a little bit lower, but I wouldn't let that scare you off if your business is really focused on weekends. These are averages, and so they don't necessarily apply to everyone, but for most businesses, it's kind of a rule of thumb there. To take the sports analogy a little bit too far, we'll call these fumbles, but everybody else on the internet calls them fails. I'll let you guys drink this in a little bit. These are a couple of big brands that tried to take current events a little bit too far. Don't need to read those. Don't need to read those slides for you, but reputation management is a big deal. One of the other reasons that people don't want to tweet is because they don't want to make this kind of mistake. If you do make this sort of mistake, the biggest thing is to be upfront about it. Be honest, be sincere in your apology, and if possible, make good, rather. I just love that stuff. All right. So I pulled most of my ROI slides because we got Nat Pham coming up, my buddy Nat. He's going to talk to you all about ROI, but I wanted to make sure that I filled out my sports cliche with our defense. To me, ROI is a defense. We want to defend our goal line, which could also be called the bottom line. You can spend any amount of time, any amount of money you want on social media, but if it just puts you out of business, then it's really not worth it. So my advice on that is to use these tips as a starting point. Find out what works for you. Be smart about it. Our ROI, as Nat will probably talk about, is a ratio. It's got a pretty basic algorithm that goes to it, but there's a lot of things that you have to measure to find out true ROI. So make sure that you're doing that if that is one of your concerns. You want to measure the time that you're spending on social media, or if you have staff assigned to it, and then what you're getting out of it. In my business, a lot of people ask me, like, well, how much does it cost a tweet? I'm like, well, I don't actually charge by the tweet, but if you wanted to put a value on any given tweet, it would be difficult. But once you have built up, this follower base and a fan base that is loyal to you, that 1,000 perfect tweets is invaluable. And 1,000 imperfect tweets still has value as well. But to put it another way, brand awareness and loyalty aren't line items on a balance sheet, but you can rest assured that they are helping ring your cash register. They are ringing your phone. They are bringing people to the table for you. And I think, if Peyton Manning's career is anything for us to judge by, sometimes the best defense is a good offense, or a great offense. You heard it here first. That's the story of the Denver Broncos this year. All right. So other than the page about buffer amp or the 10-minute Twitter things, everybody will get these. These are some great things that I like to share with everybody. Of course, whenever I update this presentation, there seems to be like 5 people that are have just posted to my feed about Twitter 101 or best practices. So here's a couple that I found. On Mashable.com, if you want to know anything about social media, Mashable.com is kind of the front page of the internet for that. I just stole that from Reddit, but that's not fair. Anyway, lists, they just did a slideshow about lists. If you want to know more about lists, again, I think that's the most underrated tool on Twitter. That's a very good slideshow to help you get started with that. Alltwitter.com had the 10 habits of great tweeters, so if you want to get more into it, that's a good thing to read as well. Mark Schaefer is a favorite of mine in terms of talking about Twitter. If you want to start following people who talk about small business in general, Huffington Post just last week had an article called "The 30 Small Business Champions to Follow on Twitter." I immediately started following them, and I think that's paid some dividends already, just in terms of filling up my buffer with great content. And then the last thing I like to share is a little site I like to call "Who Sees What" on Twitter. We didn't get too deep into it because I think this post explains it as well as any, and in kind of an amusing way. Jennifer Hish is a software developer, I believe, but she wanted to explain to her mom how Twitter works. So it's very entry level, but it goes through in terms of just the kind of strange taxonomy of how your name and other things show up in Twitter. So I advise everybody to check that out. All right, I think that's all I've got. So after all those slides, this is what I came up with at the end. If you guys have any advice on how that could be better, let me know. And I think I'm finally to the end. Any questions? Yes, right in front.
Could you talk about the demographics of who uses Twitter most? In my particular that I would care about would be a 40-plus audience, say 40, 50, 60. The question, to repeat, was about the demographics of Twitter. And in my particular situation, I'm caring about a 40-year-old, a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 70-year-old.
That would have made a good slide. So she wants to talk about Twitter demographics. I think, since it is something that's kind of mobily focused, I think the Twitter is in line with basically everything else. I mean, obviously, it's much more in the 15 to 35, and then even so in the 24 to 35. So there aren't as many folks in that demographic. But again, in a similar arc to Facebook, it's as everybody gets more comfortable with the things that we do on our phones now, as opposed to the things that we had to do from a desktop computer before. The adoption rate is the same.
And along that line would be business versus personal.
I think it's I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's pretty even. I mean, as you can see, obviously the adoption rate with with 80% of Fortune 500 companies using it as just kind of a model for everything else. I think business accounts tend to stick with it more. I think the content is better from business accounts. Personal account, you kind of, it can kind of just be off the cuff and be like, and the reputation that Twitter got in the beginning of like, why do I care what you had for lunch? I think that's a lot less of what Twitter is now, and it's a lot more people sharing the things that they are passionate about in this kind of format. Hope that answers your question. Over in the corner, we got Floyd.
Hi.
Hi.
If you're brand new to Twitter and you've just set up an account, how do you get people to find you in that great Twitter wilderness? I mean, how do you start?
Well, So you just like we saw on Seth's presentation that you can integrate your Facebook into your web page. There's a lot of opportunities to integrate your Twitter account in that sort of way. Your tweets themselves, as other people find value in your tweets, they will share them, and then those people, just in the same way that you are going to find other people to follow, other people will find you. It can be a little bit, depending on your industry, it can be a little bit difficult at the beginning. There's no really getting around that, but it's kind of like to recognize the value in what you're doing and making it a part of your overall content strategy, and that it's another place to put that out. And if you're putting out good content regularly that people are interested in and kind of following these other tips, to paraphrase, to Field of Dreams a little bit, if you build a good Twitter stream, people will follow. Hey, Christy in the back. My favorite part about this is that you guys make Floyd and Christy run all over the room.
What kind of results have you been seeing with Twitter ads? I know it's pretty new that I know Twitter was just offering a bunch of free advertising credits on Twitter ads. Have you been using them? Have you been seeing any success?
I haven't had a lot of experience with them yet. I try to focus on getting people on Twitter and doing the right things on Twitter before we start spending money on something that, again, is fairly new. And then initially this was supposed to be more of a kind of a Twitter 101, so I apologize for not really having an answer to that question. But I will certainly be looking into it, and it is something evolving. They definitely want to make that Facebook money, so they're going to try to get into the ad game as well.
Thanks.
It's something they've been working hard at, so it's kind of an evolving process. Down here in front.
Now that Twitter's becoming more tangible,
Mm.
is it also on the stock market?
I don't believe that Twitter is publicly traded. Nat, do you know better on that? Is Twitter publicly traded? They have not. Yeah, they have not IPO'd, which is one of the reasons they got to get this ad program in line, is so that they can show real. But no, you cannot quite throw your money at Twitter on the stock market yet. I'm sure it will. There's a big pile of cash waiting for them on the other end. Sir?
Hi, my company has different product lines. Having an individual Twitter account for like each product line, or one for the company?
I struggle with this a little bit myself, because every time I have an idea, the first thing I do is run and see if the Twitter handle is available. and as we talked about with the other question on that side of the room, it can kind of be a slow go at the beginning. Twitter is definitely something that once you get a critical mass, it's definitely like that curve. So I would think that unless your product lines are very different, that you would want to maybe have one kind of overarching account, as opposed to trying to have one for every line.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Does Twitter have the same type of ability as Google in terms of searches? Like, you put in keywords on Google and you can find out how many people are searching for it, demographics, that type of thing. Does Twitter have the same type of ability? I was just wondering.
So you're talking about the keyword search tool that's more in the kind of analytics set for Google?
For Google, yeah, but you were talking about Twitter searches, like people putting in.
It's not quite that fine grained, but I think there are different apps out there, and I think if you searched Twitter analytics and Twitter keyword tools, that you would find some. One of the things that Twitter did really well for itself at the beginning is they've always had a robust API, and so they've let other developers kind of use their data to kind of increase the value of what's going on Twitter itself. So it might not be native to twitter.com or the search.twitter.com, but that information is out there in a way that's searchable and very usable for
Okay,
kind of a power user. Ma'am?
How does Twitter get its revenue? How does it stay?
The question is the revenue model for Twitter. Twitter has some very powerful investors. Twitter itself is, not the only product. It was founded by Jack Dorsey, who is now making millions of dollars using Square, and they've had powerful backers. They've had powerful VC backers from the beginning, and they have some ad revenue that they've started building up, and they're trying to figure that out. But again, the big pile of cash is waiting for that IPO.
One more question, if we have it. I'm not going to force it.
I was going to say one more. Yeah, I was going to say, please, one more question. I don't want to have to leave. No, I'm just kidding. Anybody else? Sir, what can I do for you?
This might sound vain, but if you follow people that are in your peer group,
Sure.
or colleagues, whatever, and they don't follow you back, do you give it some time and unfollow them? I mean, 'cause it's kind of, like you were saying, there is kind of an etiquette there where people
Sure.
follow back. Something that really irritates me when
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I had some colleagues, at the agency where there was like, I'm only ever going to follow 50 people. That's it. And it was like, in some weeks I was in his top 50, and some weeks I wasn't. It's like I'm sitting across the room from you, and you don't even follow me. So it's kind of personal flavor of that. I don't generally. I think a lot of people, they don't think that they have the time to manicure their lists and curate their own stream, and so so their solution is if I tweet about sports 3 times in a row, be like, well, I don't care about sports, so I'm going to get rid of it. And so I think it's kind of personal flavor. If any of you guys follow me and you start tweeting and then you don't tweet, and then you don't tweet again for a year, I probably still won't unfollow you, just because of that kind of mutual respect I have for that, recognition. But a lot of people, that's kind of, like I said, it's personal flavor. I don't personally, again, I try to, reciprocate as much as possible, and it's something that I talk about, but some people do feel differently. And there's actually a lot better resources now. I saw one, as I was preparing for this, I saw one app that was basically like a Twitter reset button. So if you've been on Twitter for like 5 years and you don't even know half the people you're following anymore, like, why did I follow that account? They mentioned me once randomly, and I'm like, oh, I'll follow that. It was also like, it's like the big red button. You could just basically wipe it all out and start over again. I was like, wow, it's kind of interesting.
I bet social media etiquette could be its own entire afternoon session.
Indeed.
Okay, great.
Thank you guys so much.